All right, I'm so happy to be here with my buddy Dan Weedin. Dan Weedin is a insurance consultant, also advisor, risk mitigation assistant to a lot of businesses. Also, he's an author of Back Nine Walking, which I'm sure we'll share and talk a little bit about today. Thank you so much, Dan, for being here on timforrest.com.
Hey, Tim, it's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to having a talk about helping out your food makers out there.
Yep. So all our food makers, they run into this. Either they do know about it and it's part of their business planning, but oftentimes my clients will come to me and say, Tim, I'm going to Costco, I'm working with Publix, I'm working with HEB, I'm working with Wegmans in the Northeast or Safeway on the West Coast, and they say I need this policy, this product insurance policy. And what do I do? Who do I go to? Who's the best one to work with? And so I wanted to ask you some questions today and share some insights with food business owners so they can think about the best way to purchase and obtain insurance for their food business.
Sure. And Tim, it's insurance companies make it look easy on the commercial, right? You just talk to Flo or you go to the Gecko or something like that. But business insurance, it's a lot different. It's a lot more complicated because every business is unique, even in the food maker industry, because you have different foods being made. And so depending on what kind of food it is and all of that, the insurance becomes an important part, and it can get tricky if you don't know what you're doing. And I'm happy to share some bits of wisdom, some tips and techniques and things to think about.
So first off, like what would be, just as far as like a general liability policy, a lot of companies might have, what would be like the top three types of policies? What policies, just help us understand what first thing is, what policies do we need in the food space?
Well, number one, you're going to need a liability policy, general liability policy. Everybody's going to require that, and you want it. A general liability policy is if somebody, let's just say it, somebody dies, somebody has consumed your food, and they get sick or they die, and unfortunately that happens. And so you have to have a general liability policy. You're going to need at least $1 million policy, probably to get into Wegmans or Safeway or Costco, anybody like that. They're going to require at least $1 million. So you're going to start out with that general liability policy. The policy premium is going to be based on your sales. So you need to know what your expected sales for the next 12 months are going to be. Your insurance broker is going to ask that. If you have property insurance, if you have inventory, if you're making stuff in your, whether it's in your garage or in your facility, you have to have property insurance in case there's a fire or something that causes damage to the property, because somewhere or other you're going to have to get that property back. You have to be reimbursed. If you have employees, Tim, any of your food makers, do any of them have employees?
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Then you're going to have workers' compensation.
Right.
And workers' compensation varies greatly state to state. That is not all the same. And so if you have multiple states involved, that can become an issue. So you have to have workers' compensation. And you don't have to have this, but I highly recommend it. You need employment practices liability. And Tim, that is in the scenario that an employee sues you for discrimination, harassment, wrongful termination, retaliation, any of those things. You need to have employment practices liability. And then I'm going to throw this in. You need to have cyber insurance. If you're using a computer, a mobile device, anything, if you're using a computer, and who's not today, I don't know any business that's not, you have to have cyber insurance to protect you against ransomware. And Tim, you might have people out there saying, I don't have anything to lose. Nobody wants what I have. Really? You want it.
Yeah.
You want it. And ransomware is about somebody kidnapping your stuff. And for food makers, it might include recipes.
I can't share how important this is. And I was amazed. So I'm working on a project, building a product for Costco wholesale with a client, and they were based in Louisiana. And I didn't know this was possible. Katrina, as everyone knows, a hurricane came through Louisiana. So I asked him, how did you get into this business? How did you start this food company? And he said, well, I owned another food company prior to this one. But the floods of Katrina ended up destroying our computers, and we were out of business. Just the
Yep.
fact their computers were destroyed, all their records were on there,
Right.
along with their pricing, everything about their business. And I was just so confused that a flood destroying their
Right.
computer system would wipe out their business. But
Well,
I
think
thought
about the
food
bad
companies,
guys think about the bad guys sitting in Russia right now,
yes,
who are the
yep,
cyber criminals, some of the main ones.
right.
They really don't care. Tim, listen to this. 80%, 80% of cyber crimes, ransomware attacks,
Yep.
happen on small businesses of less than 100 employees. And the reason is that they're low-hanging fruit.
Yep.
And so when somebody says to me, "Oh, I don't have anything that anybody wants," you want it.
Right.
And a ransomware attack, you know what? They don't want money, they want Bitcoin. So if you don't have a cyber insurance policy, all of that work, exactly like what you said, except this time it's actual criminals trying to do it. You
So,
need to have a cyber policy.
okay. So how many different policies did you just go through? We just
I
talked
went
about, you
through
said,
one, two. Well, the liability and the property generally go together. That's
okay.
usually one policy, but
Okay.
those are covered together. Workers' compensation, employment practices, liability, and cyber. I'm going to give you one more, Tim, that's really important. Do you have any clients that are partnerships
I'm trying to think.
or
Maybe a
have
couple.
important people in their lives? I'm going to say it's life
Absolutely.
insurance. Keep person
Absolutely.
life insurance.
Yep.
It's really important because if
Oh,
that
100%.
if that person dies, if that client dies,
If
let's say they have a spouse, they have a significant other, they have a partner, what
I'll just,
happens?
yeah, I thought you were asking a different question. Absolutely, 100. Even if it's an LLC, you're going to have not
You
a
have
single
to.
member LLC. If you have a partner and have a group in an LLC, this is absolutely important. What you're talking about is, and the issue that I have, and I advise my clients on, and I've actually, some of the businesses I've been involved in, this is the way we organized it, is we didn't, the wives and or the significant others of the owners are not necessarily in our food business. And
No kidding.
the last thing,
Yeah.
the last thing any of our that we wanted to happen is that either one of us wake up one morning and we have a new partner that has no experience, no desire, no interest,
Doesn't want to be there.
want to
Yep.
be in the food business. Then we got to think about how do we handle that situation in the best way? And the way to mitigate that is with an insurance policy
It's
that
life
buys out,
insurance. Yep.
that pays for their part of the entity, and then makes them whole as far as and buys out the other partners so that the
Well,
business can continue on.
yeah, and Tim, I'll bring one more thing in, especially if somebody says, "Well, it's just me." Yeah, but if you have a spouse and you're a single entity ownership, you're going to have obligations, financial
Yep.
obligations. And here's the hard truth: financial obligations do not end with death.
Yep.
Somebody's got to pay them. And so I know even in just my business, I have life insurance. It's owned by my corporation.
Mhm.
I'm a single entity corporation. My wife is the vice president, but she doesn't really do anything as part of the business. But if I die, she doesn't have to pull out of the other life insurance to pay any of
So,
the obligations. And
so
so that's a really important part of it.
we own a food business. We agree with everything you're saying. We have a couple of those, but what's the best way we go about obtaining insurance coverage, risk mitigation for our food enterprise? What should we be doing as a process of getting good insurance?
Well, number one is you have to find the right insurance broker, I'm talking about that in a term of broker rather than agent. A broker is somebody who represents you. Now they may be an agent, in fact, where they can work with other companies, but this is not just a salesperson. This is somebody that is qualified and educated and hopefully in the food business, but at least enough to give you a fully rounded view, a full perspective, and be able to place business for you. I highly recommend people interview agents, get referrals from other food makers, maybe colleagues. Don't just, gone are the days of opening up the yellow pages. People might not know what that means. The yellow pages and finding an insurance agent. There's ways to be really prudent about it. The other way, and I guess I'll toot my own horn a little bit as a consultant, as a counselor and advisor on this, I help businesses find the right insurance. I act on their behalf and do the work for them. So it's step number one is you have to find the right insurance broker to start get the process done correctly.
One of the scariest, we didn't talk about this earlier. I'm going to just thinking through the broker and some of the issues that I'm aware of. One of the scariest things for food companies, and one of the things that will put a food company out of business probably the quickest, is a recall, a product
Yeah.
recall, FDA mandated, and or any other type of recall. So, do you have any comments on recall, food product recall insurance?
I do. In fact, it's interesting. One of my clients is a food maker. They're a food maker for dogs and cats. They make their own natural pet food, and recalls an issue. And that's something because you have the FDA and you have all of that. So I can't even. I mean, these are for dogs. I can't even imagine. I can't imagine what it means for food that's being consumed by humans. There is product recall insurance. And so that is, that's usually part of the property and liability policy. So when you get a liability, it might be able to be purchased individually, but normally product recall is an endorsement onto that liability and property policy.
And this leads to my question that you were just sharing about the finding the broker and the consultant. And so that is okay, so we've done that. We've got the policies, and let's say an unfortunate event takes place in our food business. Right. We're faced with a recall. We're faced with someone's been hurt, or there's even regardless if someone's been hurt or not by our product, we're facing a possible claim and or some kind of legal issue from a client that comes from this. What does that process look like? What is the claims process, and how does that? Can you kind of walk us through what that looks like and how we work through it?
Yeah, and let's say regardless of the claim, you've had some sort of a demand for payment from somebody, either a third party or it's your demand for payment if you were the one damaged by a fire or something like that. Step number one is you contact your insurance broker and find out what is the best way. Do you submit the claim through them, or do you call the insurance company directly? It might depend, and I want to say this because I think it's important. If it's something like a fire or a liability claim, I always would call the broker first. Cyber is different. Time is of the essence on a cyber claim, and your broker should have given you an 800 number directly to the cyber company because they can step in and mitigate that immediately. And so that becomes important. But number one is you've got to let the insurance company know. Have as much information as possible. The reason things get slowed down is you're in chaos. And there's a lot of times the insurance companies don't have all the facts. And so be as prepared as possible. The things that slow down claims more than anything, Tim, is how long it takes. The faster the claim is turned in, the faster you get all the information to them, the faster you get your broker on your side and on your team working it is important. And the other thing that now has happened, I was actually just hired, I'm finishing it up, by a client who was getting nowhere with what should have been a fairly simple fire claim. The reality of today is that many insurance companies are short-staffed, and adjusters aren't as plentiful as they used to be, and things have slowed down. When things slow down, it gets worse. You don't get made whole again faster. And so I really believe that whether it's you as the insured or hiring somebody as a consultant to say, I need you to bird dog for this on my account. The agent may still be incumbent on the insurance company. So making sure that there's somebody there holding everybody accountable. Those are the big issues, because claims are taking longer than ever. And sometimes it's because of staffing.
How important is the broker in this process?
Incredibly important. That's why I think it's just like you would go interview a doctor for your personal health, or you would interview an attorney, or you'd interview anybody else. Insurance agents aren't a dime a dozen. There are ones that are better than others, and they can usually prove it based. I mean, and they do it today. I mean, you can go to LinkedIn, you can look for reviews, you can ask for referrals. They're incredibly important. In the end, though, the insurance broker, more often than not, is contractually bound to the insurance company. And there's only a limited amount they can do. So it sometimes helps to have somebody else advocate for you, but they're incredibly important, Tim.
Well, what does the future look like for food businesses as far as insurance management and the process of obtaining and working with insurance companies?
Well, believe it or not, I think it's easier than it ever has been. And due to technology, I think the ability to find competent brokers and insurance agents and consultants because of the internet, because most of these folks can work in any state, usually, let's just say North America, usually they can do that. I think the future is bright. The biggest issue comes down to your food maker. They have to make it a priority. They've got to say, I can't just say, oh, I got to go buy insurance and think you're running down to the local, an insurance agency and buying it, just as if you're doing any other due diligence. It needs to be taken as a priority. The process is easier than it's ever been, and I think the future is
Wow.
very bright on that. It just takes the extra work. Hey, can I give you one more? And this is
Yep.
happening more and more. The do it yourself, the buy it online.
Yep.
Now, for some types of businesses, great. It's a viable resource. I think for food makers, when you're talking about the complexities and the intricacies and all of that, there could be out there, hey, just go online and buy it. That's not a good idea, because it's like you just said, it made me think, I'm just going to go down this aisle and buy this because it calls for that. And I'm just going to buy it. And oops, it's not quite right, or it's not right at all. So I highly recommend not doing a home gamer type deal. Don't do it yourself. Find somebody to assist you, to help you. Again, that's partly what I do as a consultant. Find a good broker, get somebody on your side. You need a team on this.
Dan, if someone had a question that's watching this, can you share your email so they could send you an
Sure.
email? Also, your LinkedIn page and or website so people could reach out to you.
Well, I'll give you my website because you can find everything there. My
Okay.
website is my name. It's Dan Weedin, and it's Weedin, danweedin.com. I don't think there's many Dan Weedins on LinkedIn. So if you put in Dan Weedin, I would like to think I'm going to pop to the top. You'll find my book, Back Nine Walking, on there. You'll also find a whole bunch of free resources and information, and I'd love to talk to you. My email's on there
Yeah,
as well.
and we'll have the links down below
Sure.
here. So, Dan, tell us about the book. Now, I love the book. It was really exciting. Particularly, there's some different great stories in there from your family. It's just really fantastic. But what's the overview of the book? And I'll let you share that. What is the book about? Back Nine Walking.
Yeah, it's not about insurance. That's the good news. But what I like to think, it's about being resilient as an entrepreneur, as a business professional. So as it relates to your food makers, if any of your food makers find themselves in the time of life where they are on the back nine of life, and I usually say that's about 40-ish and up. We're all on the back nine of life, and we all have the same types of issues related to kids growing up, kids going to college, kids getting jobs, kids having kids. So you have grandkids, maybe your parents getting older and aging, and the challenges related to that. We all have very similar things. I found that out in my work. And so this is really about being an entrepreneur and mitigating kind of the risk of life, kind of like as if you were walking the back nine of a golf course. So I like to have it. I hope it's fun. I hope it's insightful, and I hope people enjoy it. So it's not about insurance, so somebody can buy it and hopefully enjoy it.
Great. Dan, thank you so much. You've elevated my knowledge about insurance and purchasing insurance by about 500% at the minimum. And so I appreciate that. Hopefully this is a value to the guys, to you, food entrepreneurs, food makers. And thanks for joining us here on timforest.com.